Chief Inspector, this was an investigation commissioned by the Home Secretary. Why did you request this?
Well, in November last year I published a report on the border agency's handling of the legacy asylum and migration cases. I found that the Case Audit and Assurance Unit was overwhelmed with unresolved casework. I found that security checks had not been undertaken since April 2011. I found that cases had been archived without checks having been undertaken with other government departments, and Parliament had been provided with inaccurate information about the progress in resolving this particular issue. I also found poor levels of service and poor implementation of policy. So the Home Secretary asked me to conduct an investigation as to whether things had improved and for me to make recommendations to ensure that improvement was underway. And I gave her my report at the end of April this year.
Thank you. And what were the positive things you found during this investigation? Did you find the recommendations, for instance, from your November 2012 report were being implemented?
In large part, the recommendations were being implemented. Governance of the legacy cases had improved. Management information, for example, was better. Resources had increased in dealing with this issue, and I was pleased to see that the Case Audit and Assurance Unit had been renamed the Older Life Cases Unit, which I think better represents the work that it was doing. I was also pleased to see that as a result of our report last year, 25,500 cases had been returned to the live cohort, and a quality assurance framework had been introduced to ensure that they were going to be looked at very carefully, although what I've recommended is that framework is embedded in the unit. And I was pleased to see that caseworkers have been retrained in decision making and were following the relevant policies.
Were there any areas that you found had not improved or could have been better?
I was surprised to see that the information contained in paper files wasn't being used to trace applicants. And moreover, I would have liked to have seen the border agency test whether the information contained in paper files could be used in this way, and informed ministers about that prior to making a decision only to use the information on the computer system called the Case Information Database. And I've recommended that the Home Office move cautiously if it intends not reviewing paper files in future, because there is some information on those files which may lead to the tracing of applicants. I also found that the agency hadn't reviewed PNC information, Police National Computer information, in order to trace applicants, but simply to look to see whether there was any trace of criminality. There were 3,077 positive hits on the Police National Computer, and there were also maybe hits. These were where there's not an identical match with the information. And I've made a recommendation that the agency looks again at these hits to see whether it can use the PNC in order to trace individuals who are in this backlog of cases. And finally, while action has been taken to reopen archive cases, I was concerned to find that no work had actually started on them at the time of inspection. And clearly, individuals have waited long enough for the border agency to get on and deal with the cases in the asylum legacy. So now that people have been traced and are in the live cohort, I expect them to work on these cases to start it immediately.
Overall, did you find there had been an improvement since your November 2012 report into legacy asylum and migration and this follow-up investigation?
Yes, there has been improvement, and as I said before, I'm pleased to see that many of the recommendations I made last year have been implemented. But I've made 4 recommendations in this investigation report. Firstly, I think it's important that the Home Office publishes a realistic and achievable timescale for the completion of all legacy asylum and migration cases. Secondly, I think the Home Office needs to undertake its own sample of closed legacy asylum and migration cases to determine whether information contained in the paper files can help trace a greater number of applicants. And I also think that the Home Office needs to take action to review all those Police National Computer positive matches, the 3,077, to determine whether these records contain contact information which can be used to trace and locate applicants. And finally, I expect all the recommendations from my November 2012 report to be implemented quickly and effectively.
Thank you. Finally, Chief Inspector, will you be carrying out any further inspections into the area of Asylum in the coming year?
Yes, we have an inspection on the handling of asylum applications made by unaccompanied children well underway, and that will report within the next 2 or 3 months. We've also begun an inspection on asylum support. I want to assess the extent to which asylum seekers are treated fairly and appropriately, and if the support system is administered efficiently and effectively by the Home Office. And we're also going to look again at non-suspensive appeals. This was a procedure which enables people who are making claims that are clearly unfounded to be removed from the country quickly. We've looked at that previously, we want to look at it again this year. And my inspection plan for 2013 and 14 is focused on the areas where I think the most improvement needs to be made by the Home Office in immigration functions. So asylum is a key theme in this year's plan.
John Vine, Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration, thank you.
Thank you very much.